Hello, friends and viewers. Thanks for tuning in. This is Researching Caribbean Genealogy, 5 tips, 5 brief tips, hosted by New York Public Library. So my name is Andy McCarthy, and I am a reference librarian in the Milstein Division of U.S. History, Local History, and Genealogy. And before we get to the tips on the subject at hand, I just want to give a little bit of an introduction. Who is it that you're listening to? Why are you listening? Who are we? We are reference librarians. We answer questions. My colleagues and I, we answer questions on U.S. history, local history, and genealogy. These subjects are all very symbiotic. They all play off of one another. When you're doing local history research, you could be using genealogical resources. And when you're doing genealogy research, you are also potentially likely, if it's somebody in the United States, conducting U.S. history research. So an ongoing theme here is to reach out. If you have a question on, remotely related to any of these subjects, history@nypl.org is our contact info. That's what we do. We answer questions. Some of you may have visited the library, and we are located on the first floor of the Colossus of Classical Architecture on the corner of West 42nd Street and 5th Avenue in the main central research library. Maybe you've visited, maybe you've reached out to us in the past, maybe you've checked out our research guides or attended one of our public classes. This is all part of the work that we do as librarians. So reach out. You want to get a sense of what the library is, just to kind of bookend the introduction here. When you think of the building and the library, it's big. It's a big, big building. You say, well, why is it so big? What's going on in there? Well, sure, there's a lot of stuff. There are the collections, there's the books, the journals, periodicals, magazines, manuscripts and archives collections, image collections, map collections, on and on and on and on. The stuff, sure, there's a lot of that stuff. But the stuff is really just stuff without, I would argue, very humbly, is the most important resource at the library, which are the librarians. Librarians bring the collections to life. We put the public in touch with the collections, how to use the collections, how to think about them, how to approach them, how to cross-reference them. Try this, try this, try this, how to find things in the first place. Just finding it, before you can even, get to the research itself, you got to find the thing. So reach out. We want you to use the collections. A lot of times you're not going to use the library's collections that are going to inform the research that you're doing, but the librarians can say, oh, you got to check here. You got to go to the municipal archives or the national archives or wherever, some other institution. Research is all about cross-reference. So today, genealogy is one of the most popular questions that people do in family history research, and then genealogy in various ways can become qualified, and these tips. This is just sort of an introduction. We're not going to get into any advanced stages or anything like that, but this is just sort of an introduction of 5 things to think about, to kind of check off when your genealogy leads to researching individuals in the Caribbean, to islands in the West Indies. The first thing you want to do is note who the colonial power is. There were a handful of colonial, Western colonial powers involved in the islands in the Caribbean over the centuries, because depending on the colony or the colonial power, these these governments collected different types of records, and that'll determine what kind of records are available. And then that'll give you a sense of what information is in those records, because not only are the records collected differently, but the types of information in these records, they can kind of take a lot of different forms. And, and that's a whole nother subject as far as, what a genealogical record is, but a record that's going to have the type of information that you're looking for when you're researching individuals. And in a lot of cases, individuals that you may be researching dating back to the West Indies may have been enslaved. I'll get to a slide on enslavement in particular, but one of the types of records may be slave registers, where the name of an enslaved individual would actually appear, but you have a short window of time, 1807 to 1834, when typically, and of course, depending on the colonial power, this is the date range when these select materials were collected about the enslaved populations. Civil registrations, basically that's like vital records. Information collected about births, marriages, and deaths. So the other thing, when you're noting the colony, which the colonial power, that will give context to what types of records were collected in the information that's in them, is to do historical research. You say, well, this isn't going to be direct information about the individual that I'm researching, but research about the colony itself. What were the conditions? What was the sort of the sequence of power? Maybe, it was the French and then the British took over, et cetera, et cetera. Why was there, X amount of enslaved individuals in one colony versus another because of it was a sugar plantation, or, what were the crops, et cetera, et cetera. The conditions, the historical conditions. This always provides very good context, and it helps you wrap your head around too the genealogy that you're pursuing, because you don't want to keep you don't want to, it's easy to keep the blinkers on, and you want to, the periphery, the margins, the whole picture is going to lend a dimension to the time and the place where the individual you're researching occupied. In the case of somebody who was from the Caribbean and ended up in the United States, depending on the date range, they likely took a ship. And the United States, again, depending on the date range, collected passenger lists for incoming vessels incoming to ports in the US. So somebody likely took a ship. They came, you want to determine what port they may have arrived. There's ways of determining that, where this person lived, family lore, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to see if there's a passenger list. And passenger lists, early 19th century, there's a minimal amount of information. But later, around the turn of the century and onward, there are, a couple dozen columns of information about each person on the ship. So just keep in mind passenger lists. So researching enslavement is in the Caribbean in particular that's a whole, forget about a 15-minute tips. You could do an entire, semester and on about this subject. But it's difficult because you're trying to find records that were collected to silence an individual when what you're trying to do is give them voice. And there are strategies of going about that. But a few things you want to note. What is the date range? Do you have a birth and death date? That this person may have been enslaved in which colony? What island was it? And what was the colonial power involved? What did they collect slave registers? What kind of, when did they collect them? What kind of information did they collect? Is somebody named? Is it just this sort of abstract impersonal data? And then where are these located? How do you access them? Are they digitized? Et cetera. Well, one of the other few places that an enslaved individual might be named, where their name actually would appear, is in somebody's will. And in that case, you would need to know the name of the enslaver. And then, where did they die? How were wills kept, or a probate record, or some kind of estate file where potentially the enslaved individual would then pass into the household of the beneficiary and then being named in the will. So there's a lot of questions you got to ask, but you say, well, okay, oh, a will. Okay, well, what do I do now? Guidebooks. Pretty much most, whether it's very general or very, very granular, very specific, in genealogy research, there's usually a guidebook published on the subject. That at least, it's not gonna give you all the answers, but it's gonna ground you a little bit. When you hit the brick wall or you feel like, oh, I've tried everything, a guidebook, no matter how advanced or beginner you are, it's always good to check out a guidebook. And on top of that, uh, our our website, my colleagues and I have put together a good handful of research guides on popular subjects related to genealogy and local history that are, if you just Googled Milstein Division NYPL research guides, you go to the homepage, or just email us. If you say, they say this guy was talking about research guides, but I can't find the link, blah, blah, blah. But on top of that, our collections are filled with guidebooks on a ton of different subjects, and there are a good amount published on researching Caribbean genealogy. This subject heading in quotes is one way. It's a point of entry into the library's catalog, the research catalog, the online catalog, which is what you use to find items, collections, material that the library has. And one way of browsing the catalog is using these subject headings. So you would use that phrase in particular. But but in general, just tips, guidebooks. Oh, trace somebody back to Jamaica or Barbados. Is there a guidebook on that? Likely yes. And this is, just sort of a brief overview, but the two sort of mega genealogy databases that you may or may not be familiar with are Ancestry. Ancestry is a subscription database, and Family Search. Family Search is free. You need a login membership, but it's free. Each of these databases, and of course the library subscribes to Ancestry, each of these databases has a collection list or a card catalog, they like to call it. It's like the digital card catalog, which is basically a list of all the record sets in the database. There's a bazillion pages of digitized material. You want to narrow it down as much as possible. The collections or the record sets are 9 times out of 10 described by the location, whether it's a country or a county or a state. It's usually the type of record, like a census or a city directory, the location, the locale, and then the date range. And so you can go into Family Search and Ancestry into this collection list and type in the name of the island and get a list of all the records that they have related to it. It's a good way to just kind of get a feel for what they have, or what's digitized. The other way that's even more comprehensive is on Family Search. They have a map, so you can go in and scale down the locale to the specific location, open up their research wiki to see what materials they have related to that location. And you see there on the right is Ancestry. Barbados, marriages, 1854 to 1879. When you're doing genealogy research, no matter what the location, this is usually how the records are described: the locale, the type, the date range. So that's it for the 5 tips. Hopefully we're leaving you wanting more. That's always a sign of a good performance. And reach out. We hope to hear from you. history@nypl.org, and good luck with it.